Dear students, in the last video we saw how in Ashok Kumar Thakur case with respect to Article 15 Clause 5 Supreme Court went on to uphold the validity of the provision under 15.5 which excluded the application of 15.5 on minority educational institutions referred to in Clause 1 of Article 30. So this is the topic which I want to cover, and I want to really emphasize that the reading of Article 30 has to be done along with Article 15.4 and 16.4. So in this video I am going to jointly read Article 15.4 and 16.4, 15.5 with respect to Article 30, and this will cover 30 as well. So look at Article 30. Clause 1, what does it say? The head note says right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. Clause 1 says all minorities, whether based on religion or language, shall have the right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. So this is the right. Religious and linguistic minorities can establish educational institutions of their choice. Then you have clause 1a added by 44th constitutional amendment, which provides that when the property of minority educational institution is acquired, then the state shall ensure that the compensation amount will not take away the rights guaranteed under this clause. And clause 2 says that while the state is making a grant to educational institutions, it will not discriminate against minority educational institutions on the ground that they are under the management of minorities. So and then that's it. That's all we have under Article 30. Right of linguistic and religious minorities to establish educational institutions of their choice. It does not at any in any way suggest directly or indirectly that the application of Article 15 and 16 is excluded here. And what has happened over the period of time, that the reading of this right under Article 30 has been done by the Supreme Court in such a manner so as to completely exclude the application of Article 15.4 and 16.4, which means that Supreme Court has held in number of cases that in admission to educational institutions run by minority linguistic or religious, there will not be any reservation in admission, or in the appointment of services also there will not be any reservation. We have seen Article 15, every clause of it. We have seen Article 16 and different clauses of 16, and we have seen Article 30 and different clauses of it. There nowhere can we find even a remote suggestion that minority educational institutions are to be exempted from the application of Article 15 or 16. It is only the 93rd Constitutional Amendment Act which has expressly excluded minority educational institutions from the application of Article 15.5. What does it mean? It means that students from SC, ST and OBC communities cannot have reservation in minority educational institutions, nor can these candidates from these communities have any reservation in minority educational institutions under Article 16 in services, in faculty positions and in non-teaching positions. Now this first of all, this exclusion through judicial interpretation initially and subsequently through Constitutional 93rd Amendment Act, from the social justice principles of Article 15 and 16, the policy of social justice as incorporated under 15 and 16 is based on the understanding that minority educational institutions do not have caste as the organizing marker, and it is only the non-minority communities, the majority communities in our country who have a problem of caste and their societies are organized on the basis of caste. This is a complete misreading of the social realities of the Indian subcontinent and in particularly independent India and even before that. In the Indian subcontinent, all communities, religious or linguistic, are organized around the practice of caste. So minority communities, the Christians, the Muslims, the Sikhs, the Jains, the Buddhists, all these minority, religious minorities and the linguistic minorities, there are so many of them. Every language in a way becomes a minority in the other state. So in that sense, to exclude the application of social justice reservation policies on minority educational institution is to do great injustice to minority educational institutions themselves, number one, and it is great injustice to the SC, ST and OBC communities who may belong to any religion. So within minority communities there are SC, ST and OBC communities, and after Mandal Commission they are properly listed also. OBC communities, the OBC class list, it has a listing of different communities from different religions also. Similarly, ST category, it is only the SC category where some of the minority communities are not listed, who have faced untouchability and continue to face untouchability, which is really a sorry state of affairs. But to accept that and to uphold that Article 30 will not accept, will not entertain any possibility of the principle of social justice application of Article 15.4 and 16.4 on minority education institution, I think it is a great blunder, misunderstanding, misreading of the social realities of the country, and that basically comes from the fact that even the High Court and Supreme Court themselves, when they try to provide representation to minority communities, they do not look at the social configuration of these communities. And what happens is, as a result of it, is that you only have from the minority communities also only the upper caste and upper class people going to High Courts and Supreme Court. And when they read Article 13 and when they read Article 15.4, 16.4, they read it in a very problematic manner. So I think, in my opinion, Article 15.4 and 16.4 apply to minority educational institutions in letter and spirit, and social justice principles and policies must be extended to minority educational institution. There is nothing, at least in the text, to suggest that these social justice is to be excluded from minority educational institution. The SC, ST and OBC within the minority communities, they face great injustice and they find no representation in minority educational institutions. Therefore, in my opinion, this needs reconsideration by the judiciary. And this brings me to the problem of lack of representation in High Courts and Supreme Court itself, which keeps on bringing out the problem of inefficiency or misunderstanding, incapacity to understand and appreciate social realities of the country by the Supreme Court and High Court, because High Courts and Supreme Court themselves do not represent different social classes of the country, which is a very problematic thing, because if you do not have members of SC, ST and OBC communities sitting on the bench, then it is very, very difficult for the bench to appreciate the problems which these communities face, whether they belong to minority or majority community, that does not matter. And from there, therefore, again, when it comes to appointment of judges in High Court and Supreme Court, there is really nothing in the text of the Constitution under Article 16.4, in any part of the Article 16, to suggest that there cannot be any reservation in the appointment of High Court and Supreme Court. Article 16.4, I think, should apply to the appointment of High Court and Supreme Court with as much force and vigor as it should be applied to Article 13 in minority education institutions themselves. That is the only way to improve the efficiency of Supreme Court and High Courts with respect to, particularly with respect to to the policies of social justice under 15 and 16, but it will also generally improve the performance of the Supreme Court and High Court when it is far more representative of the diverse reality of the Indian society. And here we can refer to Article 335, which is on the question of efficiency of administration and how Supreme Court has misread this Article 335 on so many occasions. Let us have a look at this article. It says that the claims of the members of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes shall be taken into consideration consistently with the maintenance of efficiency of administration in the making of appointments to services and posts in connection with the affairs of the union or of state. Now, what does it say? That the claims of SC and STs must be taken into account, must be considered consistently with the maintenance of efficiency. Maintenance of efficiency of administration, therefore, that is how Article 335 is to be read. Maintenance of efficiency of administration requires that the claims of SC and ST OBC should in state services, in the affairs of the union and the state, must be liberally entertained. If we are serious about maintaining efficiency of administration, then we must come up and support representation of SC and ST and OBC in administrative positions. Otherwise, we will have the problem of inefficient administration. We will have a problem of inefficient performance by high courts and Supreme Court. Keep on making a mess of number of social justice policies, and they find it very, very difficult to resolve the problems and appreciate the policies which are directed towards the welfare of SC, ST and OBC communities. And even generally also we know that the performance of high courts and Supreme Court and the administration bureaucracy on number of socio-economic indicators is very, very poor and pathetic. If only we had better representation of different classes, the performance of the efficiency of administration might have been better. This fact that the representative administration is more efficient administration, representative judiciary will be more efficient judiciary. No one has been able to articulate it better than Justice O. Chinnappa Reddy from the bench. So from the bench of Supreme Court, you have Justice O. Chinnappa Reddy, who has articulated this impact of representation of SC, ST and OBC classes in services, in higher positions, in administration. And I want to quote, this is very important, and I want to quote a full passage from his judgment, from his opinion in K.C. Vasant Kumar versus State of Karnataka, a judgment delivered in 1985 by the Supreme Court 5 judges bench. And in this judgment, Justice O. Chinnappa Reddy observed, and we need to very closely appreciate what he has observed, and he has tried to cover almost all the controversies, major controversies back in 1985, which surround the issue of reservation. Justice Chinnappa Reddy says that one of the results of the superior elitist approach towards reservation is that the question of reservation is invariably viewed as the conflict between the meritarian principle and the compensatory principle. That so many people often try to make it out as an issue that if you apply reservation, then it will compromise the merit and the efficiency of administration, which is not the case, because it only goes on to increase the collective merit of the society, and it goes on to improve the efficiency of administration. So Justice Reddy says no, it is not so. The real conflict is between the class of people who have never been in or who have already moved out of the desert of poverty. So I'm just going to read out the opinion in full point by point. So it is under quotation. The real conflict is between the class of people who have never been in or who have already moved out of the desert of poverty, illiteracy, and backwardness and are entrenched in the oasis of convenient living, and those who are still in the desert and want to reach the oasis. There is not enough fruit in the garden, and so those who are in want to keep out those who are out. The disastrous consequences of the so called Mediterranean principle to the vast majority of the undernourished, poverty stricken, barely literate, and vulnerable people of our country are too obvious to be stated. And what is merit? There is no merit in a system which brings about such consequences. Is not a child of the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, or other backward classes who has been brought up in an atmosphere of penury, illiteracy, and anti culture, who is looked down upon by the tradition and society, who has no books and magazines to read at home, no radio to listen, or no TV to watch, no one to help him do his homework, who goes to the nearest local board school and college, whose parents are either illiterate or so ignorant and uninformed that he cannot even hope to seek their advice on any matter of importance. A child who must perforce trudge to the nearest public reading room to read a newspaper, to know what is happening in the world. Has not this child got merit? Has not this child got merit if he, with all his disadvantages, is able to secure the qualifying 40 or 50% of the marks at a competitive examination? And we are the children of the upper class who have all the advantages, who go to St. Paul's High School and St. Stephen's College, and who have perhaps been specially coached for the examination, may secure 70, 80 or even 90% of the marks. Surely a child who has been able to jump so many hurdles may be expected to do better and better as he progresses in life. If a spring flower he cannot be, autumn flower he may be, why then should he be stopped at that threshold on an alleged Mediterranean principle? The requirements of efficiency may always be safeguarded by the prescription of minimum standards. Mediocrity has always triumphed in the past in the case of the upper classes. But why should the so-called Mediterranean principle be put against mediocrity when we come to the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and backward classes? And then he goes on to the issue of efficiency. And it is very revealing, the observation that Justice Uchenippa Reddy has made about efficiency. He says, and I quote, "Efficiency is very much on the lips of the privileged whenever reservation is mentioned. Efficiency, it seems, will be impaired if the total reservation exceeds 50%. Efficiency, it seems, will suffer if the carry forward rule is adopted. Efficiency, it seems, will be injured if the rule of reservation is extended to promotional post. From the protest against reservation exceeding 50% or extending to promotional post and against the carry forward rule, one would think that the civil service is heavenly paradise into which only the archangels, the chosen of the elite, the very best may enter and may be allowed to go higher up the ladder. But the truth is otherwise. The truth is that the civil service is no paradise, and the upper echelons belonging to the chosen classes are not necessarily models of efficiency. The underlying assumption that those belonging to the upper caste and classes who are appointed to the non-reserved caste will, because of their presumed merit, naturally perform better than those who have been appointed to the reserve post, and that the clear stream of efficiency will be polluted by the infiltration of the latter into the sacred precincts is a vicious assumption, typical of the superior approach of the elitist classes. There is neither statistical basis nor expert evidence to support these assumptions that efficiency will be necessarily impaired if reservation exceeds 50%, if reservation is carried forward, or if reservation is extended to promotional posts. Arguments are advanced and opinions are expressed entirely in on an ad hoc presumptive basis. The age-long contempt with which the superior or forward caste have treated the inferior or backward caste is now transforming and crystallizing itself into an unfair prejudice, conscious and subconscious. Ever since the inferior castes and classes started claiming their legitimate share of the cake, which naturally means for the superior caste parting with a bit of it. Although in actual practice their virtual monopoly on elite occupations and posts is hardly threatened, the forward castes are nevertheless increasingly afraid that they might lose this monopoly in the higher ranks of government service and the profession. It is so difficult for the superior caste to understand and rise above their prejudice, and it is so difficult for the inferior castes and classes to overcome the bitter prejudice and opposition which they are forced to face at entry stage. Always one hears the word efficiency as if it is sacrosanct, and the sanctorum has to be fiercely guarded. Efficiency is not a mantra which is whispered by the Guru in the Shishya's ear. The mere securing of high marks at an examination may not necessarily mark out a good administrator. An efficient administrator, one takes it, must be one who possesses, among other qualities, the capacity to understand with sympathy and therefore to tackle bravely the problems of a large segment of population constituting the weaker sections of the people. And who better than the ones belonging to those very sections? Why not ask ourselves why 35 years after independence the position of the scheduled caste etc. has not greatly improved? Is it not a legitimate question to ask whether things might have been different had the district administrators and the state and the central bureaucrats been drawn in large numbers from these classes? So this is how justice and the quotation goes on. I will supply you the judgment also. You can read his opinion in full from this case, K.C. Vasant Kumar versus State of Karnataka. And it really brings it out to the point of clash between classes which go on to constitute we the people of India. We the people of India is not a homogeneous whole body, and there are different sections, different classes which go on to constitute it. And unless and until all the classes are represented in educational institution, in government services, in private centers of power, in high courts, in Supreme Court, we will not be able to have social justice. One, we will not be able to have equality of opportunity. We will not have what is so important to the constitution, fraternity. Because if vast majority of the people are completely excluded, there is no sharing of the space of power, space of education, educational institution, space in say for example media, then it does not matter that we have got a constitutional democracy on paper. Constitutional democracy and the democracy that we have so proudly endorsed, that will become meaningless because the vast majority of the population, their problems will never come to the forefront. During Corona pandemic also we saw, when it came to the question of poor laborers, the rickshaw pullers, thela people, the weakest of the weak, the state was unable to comprehend and unable to anticipate their response, and it was caught off guard. It had absolutely no idea how these classes live, how do they feel and how do they move, what their anxieties are, what their real problems are, because there is no one from their classes representing them on those tables where policy decisions are taken. Their problems, their peculiar conditions are not brought onto the table, and therefore the administration becomes very inefficient in performing its task. So I will leave you with these thoughts. Please follow the judgments which I am going to supply to you along with this video, and from the next class we will start the next topic. Thank you.